Hi, this is Larry Henry at Gambling.com. Welcome to The Edge. I'm joined by my good friend and Gambling.com colleague, Steve Bittenbender. Steve covers the states for Gambling.com and is one of the most authoritative reporters in the country on what's happening with gaming legislation and casinos and so forth. Steve, thank you so much for being with me this afternoon.
Larry, sorry.
No.
Larry.
Always great seeing you, Steve. You and I were together at GDC out in out at G2E out in Las Vegas a couple years ago. Even in that time span of a couple of years, Steve, the industry has changed so much and things are moving so fast. So many disruptors are jumping into the gaming sphere that is kind of, if you snooze, you lose out on tax revenue, on customers who may want to be sports betting or iGaming customers. So the industry's moving at a pace. I don't even think lawmakers really understand what's going on, newspaper editorial writers and all those kind of people. It's moving so quickly. And if you would, Steve, I'd love to talk to you a little bit about that, starting with online casino gaming, where you can grab your phone, get on your phone, play craps, play roulette, play the big game, slots. Very popular. About a half dozen states have it. Outpaces sports betting, brings in more revenue, more tax revenue, in part because it brings in people, a demographic that's not really a sports betting demographic in every case, especially attracted to things like slots. But there's pushback, there's resistance as states try to get that on in different states. If you would, Steve, what's going on nationally in some of this? You got Maryland, Louisiana legislatures coming up in the spring. Arkansas is looking at it. What's going on nationally with efforts to legalize online casino gaming, known as iGaming, known as iCasino? What's happening nationally, and what is the resistance at the state level?
Well, Larry, a couple things. It's going kind of slow right now for iGaming, and a lot of the reason why for that is they're meeting some resistance from other companies in the gaming industry, from the unions and from some of the smaller regional casino operators. It's not just in Maryland, it's in other states as well. It would not surprise me that, when it comes up in Louisiana, that some of the same companies will also express concerns down there. And a lot of the reason is there's the concern about cannibalization. Now, you see there's stats, the American Gaming Association just last week came out, showed that, iGaming operators in the 7 states where there is full iGaming, produced almost $8.5 billion in revenue, and, significant amount of, almost 300 and I think it's about 390 million in tax revenue for those states. So, a lot of money has been made, and that was just in Pennsylvania. Excuse me, the 390 was just in Pennsylvania for 24-25 fiscal year through January. So 7 months in January through this current fiscal year, they've gotten 390 million. So there's a substantial, market there for it. The question is, while it may raise revenue, does it hurt the smaller, operators that may be relying on people to come to their casino, whether or not, it's just to play or, to eat and to watch a show, whatever. That's the rub right now. And there needs to be some sort of reconciliation between all gaming partners to, not just, with like FanDuel and DraftKings, they've got to get together with Churchill Downs and Cordish and those groups to come together, come with a plan. There may have to be some revenue sharing involved, just, a hold harmless fund or something along those lines, just to make sure that everyone still, stays as whole as they possibly can. But, until that happens, I really don't see iGaming going anywhere in any other state. There's just no unity from the gaming community on this right now.
Let me play devil's advocate a little bit, and this is another voice you hear. Yes, absolutely. That's the resistance from the brick and mortars who are concerned that people will not go into the brick and mortar. There are concerns about job losses with dealers and so forth. another point of view reminds me of when I was a reporter years ago in Nevada. Um, Sheldon Adelson of Las Vegas Sands is no longer with us, but at that time years ago, and Frank Fahrenkopf, who was the RNC chairman and later was AGA chairman, the industry at that point was very resistant to anything online, poker, anything, sports betting, because of the concern that people wouldn't go into the casinos. Well, now, Las Vegas Sands doesn't even have any casinos in the U.S. They want to get into Dallas, own the Mavs now with minority owner Mark Cuban, and they want to get a casino in Dallas, but they're in Macau and Singapore. Macau,
Right.
now I guess Trump is saying Macau is even, a foreign adversary potentially. So you got some political issues involved, but they're not even in the U.S. anymore. But that's an example of how resistance from the brick and mortars has existed. One of the things I've heard from people, and I don't know if this is gaining any traction legislatively, is listen, things change. It's like Sam Walton said, if you're not growing, you're dying, or something. That's a bad paraphrase. But things change. I remember Borders Bookstore, gone. They didn't have an e-reader. I remember Blockbuster, gone because Netflix and others came along. At what point does there need to be some sort of, it's going to change, it's going to happen? I was just in California on TV, Goldfish Casino, John Stamos has an ad, and it says legal in California, Texas, and Georgia, 3 states that don't even have sports betting. So they're running ads on TV. People don't know. They don't care. The Uber drivers, the bartenders, they're all doing sports betting. They're all on apps overseas. They're doing, sweepstakes casinos. So at what point does the industry say it's changing? People are going to use their phones to gamble. We better get on board with iGaming and slots. Find some way to incentivize people. I use my Discover points to buy books on Amazon. Find some ways to incentivize people to come in, or the industry's disruptors will come in. There are always disruptors. Kindle was a disruptor to the brick and mortar bookstores. Cars were disruptors to the stagecoach industry. At some point, a disruptor is going to come in and do it better, or so you better get on board. What's the argument? What's the counter to that argument?
Well, the counter to that argument is, while there's ubiquity in online, it's a two-way street. Yes, people like yourself and myself, yeah, we can get on our phones, bet on sports, and in certain states bet, go play blackjack, slots, whatever. But at the same time, our kids they're afraid that kids to do it. Yeah, I could set up an account for my son and just say here, or set up an account, in my name and say, here, son, have at it. And while there's some legitimate concerns about that, there's always going to be, those types of concerns. And, you see some states, Iowa, for example, Iowa's really, ever since the scandal that they had with Iowa State and University of Iowa with the student athletes up there, they've taken some proactive measures to make sure that, as much as they can, that, underage betting is strictly frowned upon and not legal in Iowa, and there will be repercussions if you're caught. States can do that, and there's got to be also the education as well. People have got to know that, hey, you've got to be 21, or depending on what state, you got to be 18. And if you're not, and we catch you, there's going to be serious consequences for that. So that's one right there. And then, it's also just, again, as I mentioned earlier, there's got to be a consensus that is raised. When sports betting first came out, when online first came out, right as PASPA was repealed by the Supreme Court, everyone was gung-ho about it. And everyone thought it was going to just be, a tremendous opportunity for everyone. And, you see online and retail open at the same time. And in a lot of these states, Kentucky, for example, Kentucky is about a 96% online sports betting market. Indiana is about 95%. Ohio is about 96, 97%. Most of these states are online only. And a lot of the smaller casinos that were looking to build sports books or looking to develop sports books, kind of got lost in the shuffle because, I can go to a casino and bet at one sports book, or I can stay at my home, get Sunday Ticket, get Red Zone, watch all, have access to all the games that I want, and bet from whatever sports book I want. So, there's that concern. As I said, that when it comes to iGaming, yeah, I may have a Caesars casino down the street from me, but if I've got FanDuel's and DraftKings and BetMGM on my phone, I can play blackjack just as well from my phone as I could at a table. Now, some people may prefer a table, and that's that's genuinely their right. But I know the younger generation is fine using their phones for whatever. So there's got to be that acceptance to it. And as you mentioned, Netflix took out Blockbuster, Amazon took out Walden Books, and so forth. B. Dalton as well. They took out the retailers, and at some point, some of these retail gaming operators, some of the smaller ones especially, may find themselves squeezed out just because it is technology, it is progress. That's just the way that capitalism works. It is a zero-sum game, and while you can try to protect yourself as much as you can, at some point you're going to get squeezed out, and maybe you're just trying to get as much money as you can until that happens. But as you said, it is inevitable that iGaming is going to take over, and there will still be some casinos, obviously. Some places just have one or two casinos in their in their cities and in their communities. Those will some of those will still stick around. Obviously, Vegas will still be Vegas for as long as for as long as I can imagine. But you're going to see probably a whittling down of the number of brick and mortar operators as online gaming becomes more robust. The question is, when is that tipping point? When does that happen? It probably doesn't happen at least until the end of this decade, if not longer.
That's a good point. I want to talk a second about an effort along those lines in Arkansas, but also, and you mentioned Las Vegas, and you're absolutely right. You take a place like Las Vegas in the middle of the desert, 4 or 5 hours from the biggest metropolitan area, Los Angeles. I think 20% of their customers come from Los Angeles. Effort to build a high-speed train, so on, so on. So there are always efforts to try to fend off disruptors, try to integrate what's new technologically into what you already have. And so even Las Vegas is an example of that. I think Caesars may have the number wrong. I think they're spending like $1 billion or something, a lot of money to upgrade the entertainment, restaurants, those kind of things in their properties on the Strip. Again, I may have the figure wrong, but they're really working on that end of it. Plus, Las Vegas itself now is positioning itself as the sports capital of the world. The A's are coming in 3 years, and they got the Raiders and the Golden Knights. NBA ultimately will come. So more money is made from entertainment conventions. It's especially a convention town. And food and shows, you have Adele, you have Usher, all that kind of stuff, even more than gaming. So, yeah, I mean, even Las Vegas is trying to transition and adjust. And you and I have talked to Senator Dabo in New York, and his point is, with iGaming, you can do some incentivizing. You can do some things to pair brick and mortars with online. So maybe there's a way to not get lost as technology advances. One of the places that's happening, and you've covered this, is in Arkansas, where there's a casino in Pine Bluff, which is as you know, small town south of Little Rock, the capital. 3 brick and mortar casinos in Arkansas, one over by Memphis in the northeast part of the state, one in Hot Springs, traditional, long time casino, horse track, and nobody knows the horse racing industry better than you do. And then there's Saracen, south of Little Rock. So Saracen wants iGaming, and there's a battle over coupling that with NIL funding for the university. But Oaklawn doesn't. And so, again, it's the whole brick and mortar push and pull. That may be an example of what you're talking about, especially in a state where, from the metropolitan areas like Little Rock and Northwest Arkansas, 3 or 4 hours away from a casino. You're not gonna get those people to drive 3 hours, but maybe you can get them on the phone is part of the argument. Is that sort of what you're talking about as in a state like Arkansas?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And it's also where the power is in Arkansas. Obviously, Saracen is, and their leaders are trying to, expand their footprint. They're trying to appeal to, Razorback fans and fans of all the other college teams in Arkansas. And I think they've got a good, they've got a good plan going, but Oaklawn is, the 800-pound gorilla in the capital, and they're the only horse track there, and as long as they have any power, they're going to be the ones that basically dictate where things go. At least that's my feeling on that. And until Oaklawn is ready to get on board with iGaming, then you're probably not going to see iGaming in Arkansas at all. It would just be like, here in Kentucky, it wouldn't, unless Churchill Downs gives its blessing for it, you wouldn't see it here. Or Caesars probably in Indiana, where they've got 3 casinos and have a license for another one that they operate. So, it's all about who has the power. And right now, Saracen, they're trying to get it. They're trying to win over public support. But until they can do that, it's going to be up to Oaklawn to determine when iGaming will be in there in Arkansas. That's the way I see it.
Yes, and I'll thank you for that perspective. And let's transition. Speaking of disruptors, about things that merged into that have sort of nosed their way into the industry and really are really changing the industry in many ways, in ways that a lot of lawmakers don't even understand. Dina Titus from Nevada, in Congress, former state legislator, as you know, she's trying to push back on these prediction markets at the congressional level. But I guarantee you, state by state, even in Congress, a lot of lawmakers don't really know what's going on with that. Now, people in the sports betting world do. Like if you look at Alex Monahan, odds jam, and full disclosure, odds jam now is a part of our umbrella. But that aside, when you go to their YouTube channel and those kind of things, there are all kind of lessons on how to play these different sweeps books and things like that. There's just a lot going on that bettors can access that the conversation that a lot of public officials are having doesn't affect those bettors at all. They're going to find a way, whether it's illegally overseas or through disruptors to the current model. One of those disruptors is the prediction markets. I remember back during the presidential election, Harris and Trump, there was some discussion over whether it was even legal to bet on the election. Now that's only been several months ago. Since then, I saw the person who was the founder of Kalshi on one of the major prediction markets on CNBC not long ago, and he was pointing out their app is downloaded more than Facebook, Uber, on and on and on. It's massively popular among bettors because now on Kalshi, one of those prediction markets, and it's still a gray area, and there's a big roundtable with federal officials coming up about this. But you can go now, as you know, Steve, I can go into Kalshi right now on my computer, bet on everything from the recent Four Nations hockey tournament to baseball to upcoming, March Madness, on and on and on, in a way that's sportsbook-like. And I can even bet on what the press secretary for the president is going to talk about first today. So here's another disruptor that's entered the market. And is the industry changing quickly enough, or is it going to get steamrolled by these disruptors? I saw, again, out in LA about a month ago, Underdog has a big giant on the side of a building, on one of the freeways in LA, big advertisement. So there are all these people coming into these markets where it's illegal sports betting, like California, Texas, Georgia, and they are disrupting the model. You got some regulation issues, you got some taxation issues that states are missing out on. California, as you know, tribal control of gaming issues legislatively, they're talking about not even now revisiting legalizing sports betting to 2028. I mean, 3 years may be too late to sort of get
Right.
where do prediction markets go, and what's the best way you would describe those to people who may be watching and aren't really sure what is all this new stuff in the gaming industry?
Sure. Well, prediction markets, there's been predicted that has been around for years. They've been a smaller operator, kind of very niche, focusing on politics only. They were, they were considered fine by the CFTC for years, and then they all of a sudden kind of grew bigger than what they were supposed to, and CFTC tried to shut them down. And Kalshi also at the same time was trying to get in. It's like, hey, look, if you're letting Predictit do this, let us do it as well. And that's kind of what started this whole thing. Predictit eventually got a court to side with them and say that the CFTC overreached, which allowed them to stay in. And then after the CFTC, rejected Kalshi for, I think it was the second or third time, Kalshi took him to court. And so far, that case has not been settled yet, but Kalshi got a court to side with them as well. So that's what allowed them in the last month or so of the election to get started, offering, odds on the presidential election, and, who's going to control the Senate, who's going to control the House, and so forth. And, now Kalshi's basically saying, let's see how far we can go with this. We've done politics, that's fine, but let's do sports now. Let's do, they've always had markets, for like natural disasters and other things in pop culture events, so forth like that. There's never really been much of a problem with those things. But, federal law had been, for the longest time that, you couldn't do markets on sports. You couldn't do markets on wars, things like that. But now, Kalshi's kind of pushing that envelope to see, and let's just see how far we can go. And the biggest development, I think, for Kalshi has been, they're courting influence within the Trump administration.
Yeah.
Believe there's one of their board members now is on the CFTC.
Trump.
I believe that's
Well, it's on Kalshi's. He's with Kalshi, right? Trump's son,
right. Yeah, one of Kalshi's board members is now on the CFTC. So so obviously that's only one voice, but you got Donald Trump Jr. as a consultant with Kalshi.
Yeah.
So obviously the administration is probably going to lean toward what Kalshi wants. And then you just kind of get into, where do we go from here with that? And right now, Kalshi is federally regulated, and they can offer in all 50 states. And I believe they can offer to 18 and up, which is another issue that some in the gaming industry have as well. Not all states do that. Kentucky does it. And a few other smaller states do it, but most states it's 21 and up to bet on sports. So there's concern there, and there's got to be some common ground, some consensus about what those markets are able to do. And right now, as you mentioned, you were able to bet on the Four Nations, you were able to bet on the Super Bowl with them.
Yeah.
And, the big benefit with Kalshi was you could do it in live, in real time.
Right.
Crypto.com has something similar, but they froze trading during games. So, if you had Philadelphia, for example, if you had Philadelphia winning the NFC Championship, and you wanted to buy more shares of them for shares on them, during the game, you couldn't. You had to wait until after the game ended. Kalshi, you could get on and you could hammer it and buy as much as you could before, obviously that would jack up the price, but you could buy. It was, that fluid, and that's something that I think a lot of sports bettors have wanted, is that kind of exchange. And obviously, companies like Sport Trade have tried to do it at a state by state level because of the Wire Act. The Wire Act prohibits them from sharing the information they get from Virginia with the information they have in the betting that they have in New Jersey and so forth. So some of these operators are at a distinct disadvantage, while Kalshi and whoever else decides to enter this market. So it's going to be interesting, especially how this pans out over this next year or so. If the CFTC says yes, Kalshi, you're free to do sports betting, you're free to do sports markets, however you see fit. And if they go from there, then I think you're going to see probably at a congressional level, Congress then get involved, because there are going to be people from states like New York and like California, two divergent states as far as gaming goes. New York has a 51% tax on its sports betting. California doesn't have sports betting yet. So they're going to, you're going to see those two states. Texas is another example, maybe saying, okay, let's rein this in, or let's, see what, the states can do to get a share of that to, ensure that, education or whatever they use gaming funds for are covered, so that, so that people can, so that states can, make sure that they have the money for the programs that they're looking to fund. So, as I said, I think this year's going to be a pretty decisive year for that. And, it may also come up to the Supreme Court. And if the Supreme Court rules against Kalshi, then, what does the CFTC do after that? Do they then say, hey, look, we know we know the Supreme Court ruled for us, but, it's a different administration now. You're good to go. And it's kind of ironic, really, when you think about it, because where were we 8 years ago?
Yeah.
The first Trump administration, wanted to basically cover all, online lottery under the Wire Act. And they were met with a lot of resistance from that. And eventually New Hampshire won that case against the Trump administration's Justice Department. And, online lottery was spared from being included in the Wire Act. So the Trump and the Trump administration may be doing this, total 180 on online gaming and, how it's available and who it's available to across the country. And that's, it's kind of an interesting dynamic. And it's definitely going to be something worth watching here as the year goes on.
Very definitely. And we need to do a separate show on sweepstakes casinos and efforts to tax sports books. And it sort of gets back before we close to that whole if you snooze, you lose thing. I mean, again, the parallel with bookstores, not really a fair parallel, but somewhat. Amazon comes out with an e-reader, the Walden Books and the B. Daltons, the Borders. They think people want to go into a brick and mortar. Barnes & Noble comes up with its own e-reader. It's the only one left standing. In other words, do you evolve the Sam Walton thing or do you die? And so, you look at the sports betting is illegal in California, Texas, and Georgia. It's not. It's not because of the prediction markets. And that, so there's that whole culture of people who bet on sports that public officials and newspaper editorial writers and those kind of people don't understand and don't know. They're looking for a place to wager. They don't really care. And so they're more protected with the regulated publicly traded companies, the DraftKings and the FanDuels. But if lawmakers and people in those states where it's illegal don't sort of, it's again the snooze you lose. If they don't sort of get on the ball, they may lose the opportunity for those publicly traded companies that are heavily regulated, play by the rules, to build up a customer base and to build up credibility and those sort of things. It's sort of, I'm not suggesting that the prediction markets aren't fair and play by the rules, but some of the overseas places, you're going to have a problem with the unregulated places. I guess where it's sort of a crossroads, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, where so much change is happening so fast with disruptors to the industry that I'm not sure people, not the bettors, but the policymakers, and does a FanDuel and a DraftKings, do they somehow pair up with prediction market companies or do their own sort of facsimile? I don't know. But it's happening so fast. It's dynamic, and it's kind of an interesting time, candidly, especially for people like us who track this stuff.
Well, it's interesting because, just a couple of years ago, the only main threat to, the current online sports betting market was, these daily fantasy sports operators, Price Picks and Underdog mainly. Those were the two that were, considered considered the threat to the sports betting industry. And, AGA and some of the operators, went after them in the, with the gaming commissions, and were saying, hey, look, send cease and desist letters to these operators and get them out, or have them, retool their game so that, that it doesn't threaten us as much. Then you had sweepstakes. Obviously that's still happening. So you had, now you're seeing companies, states go after Bovada and Bet US and all these offshore sports books. So a second front emerged. Now with Kalshi, you're seeing a third front emerge. So, so you're, it's going to stretch these states pretty thin, to try to battle or keep an eye on all these different threats. And I think at the end of the day, I agree. I think, FanDuel and DraftKings, they're going to take a look at it. And if Kalshi ends up getting approved, you're going to see them probably try to offer something similar. DraftKings did it. It was interesting. I was watching Indiana Pacers game last night on the FanDuel Sports Network app.
Yeah.
And while I was watching that, I happened to get there was a commercial that came on for DraftKings, equivalent to what Price Picks and Underdog is. Their fantasy sport, and they were marketing it to people in Missouri.
Yeah.
So the major sportsbook operators, your FanDuels and your DraftKings, I think will definitely look to adapt to to compete or to keep their market share with whatever else is legal or whatever else is running. So it wouldn't surprise me at some point to see a FanDuel or DraftKings get an exchange or seek CFTC approval to operate something along those lines. That's probably what it's going to end up taking at some point. And, then that is just going to further disrupt the gaming industry because, okay, I can bet on my FanDuel app, here in Kentucky and play that way, or I may be able to get better odds if I use the FanDuel exchange and, bet that way. That way I can, change my bet throughout the game, or, okay, I see, a bet that I have on the Cincinnati Reds. Okay. Futures bet that I have on the Reds, maybe it's going down a little bit. Either I, buy into the dip or I cut my losses.
Yeah.
So, those are going to be some interesting things that I think will happen here in the near future if the states don't get involved, or if the federal government doesn't take, significant action to stop some of these things.
I think that's where it's headed. If the states, like the big states, California and Texas, the biggest states in the country, don't have regulated tax sports betting. Georgia, massive state, no legal sports betting. Although you can do variable payout DFS sites. There are a ton of those. There are a ton of sweeps books. There are a ton of you can do prediction markets. So in those states, you can bet on sports. So if lawmakers in those states continue to foot drag, maybe at some point they're missing out on a regulated industry that pays a tax base, that all those needs in the state. You got California, they can't even put out. I don't mean to make light of this, but
Right. No, exactly.
They have a lot of needs in these states, and they're going to miss out on a regulated taxed industry. I don't know. It's going so fast.
Right. And it goes back to kind of the point that I made at the beginning here, where you don't have consensus among the gaming interest. California, for example, you got over 60 tribes right now in that state that offer gaming. Obviously, some of them are big, others not so much. And the discussion's got to be, okay, how do we make this to where all states receive some equity all tribes receive some equity in this, and don't get pinched because one operator just happened to sign up with FanDuel, another signed up with DraftKings, and they're going to get 80% of the revenue or whatever out of California, and just dry up everybody else. That discussion has to be had, and until there's a consensus reached there, you're probably not going to see anything move out of California, because lawmakers, are not going to decide on something until they know that the gaming industry is fully behind it, and that way they can go to it and say, hey, the gaming industry's behind this. They're wanting this. The people want it. This is the way we're going to do it, and move forward. If there's not that consensus, you're going to see what happened, obviously, in California just a couple of years ago, where it's going to get voted down, vehemently voted down, and who knows when it would be able to come up again.
And the disruptors move in and take it over. So
exactly.
Steve, thanks so much, man. I really do appreciate that perspective. We got to continue this conversation because it's happening at lightning speed, and I'm not sure, as I say, public policymakers are really aware of everything that's going on, and really, sort of at the end of the day, the people who could be hurt in this are the bettors who are using these places that aren't regulated and don't have access to regulated markets and taxed markets, which also provide state services. Steve, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us,
Larry. It's my pleasure. Happy to come on anytime.
I'm Larry Henry with Steve Bittenbender at Gambling.com. Thank you for joining us on The Edge.